Well met, my viewers, and welcome to Castlevania Month. In this season of Spooks, I figure it's only fair as a gamer to celebrate the greatest vampire epic ever given code. Castlevania is a series I've grown up with since I was in grade school, and over the years I've seen it grow from a simple series of platformers with ball-busting difficulty into a millennium-spanning saga dealing with faith in the nature of humanity. With monsters. The characters and story became increasingly significant as the series wore on, and some of them rank among my favorite characters ever. So I'm kicking off the month by sharing the 10 that appeal to me the most. I'm judging them mainly on personality and actions and less on abilities and iconic status, and my own personal bias will most likely come into play. Anyways, grab your whip, stock up on hearts, and make sure you've had some roasted wall chicken. It's game time! Many brave souls have stood up to the knight throughout the series, and the Belmont clan has typically been at the forefront. Simon, Trevor, Christopher, Just, Richter, Sonia, wait, he was retconned. And it all started with one knight who gave up everything in a desperate quest to save his beloved. That's right, I'm starting off this list with the progenitor of House Belmont, Leon from Lament of Innocence. In all honesty, I consider Leon to be one of the most underappreciated characters in the series. For starters, during the Crusades, he was one of the most honored and respected among all knights, but he didn't care about his glory. He cared more about his ideals and his beloved Sarah to the point that he abandoned his title when she was abducted so he could save her. And it isn't as though he's all talk. Leon was a master of weaponry, being able to handle the whip with no trouble. But that's not really the important thing here. What's important is his devotion. It's especially shown in the final act of the game when it's revealed that Sarah was bitten by Walter, the game's antagonist, and would need to be sacrificed in order to complete the whip. Leon didn't exactly take this well. It took Sarah's last wish for Leon to agree to the ritual and forge the vampire killer. He even was able to overcome his shock at the betrayal of his once friend Matthias, who set the whole thing in motion in the first place. That takes some serious moral fortitude, something that his descendants would fortunately share.
From this day on, the Belmont clan will hunt the knight!
Okay, let me clear the air. When I said the Castlevania 64 game sucked, that was purely my opinion, and I apologize if it sounded like I spoke for the majority when opinions actually seem to be rather split. I actually played both CV64 and Legacy of Darkness, and from a gameplay standpoint, neither held my attention at all. Oh well, at least we got Cornell out of the deal. As is the case with Leon, I feel that Cornell is a very underrated character. While some people would think that werewolves are little more than savages, this guy proves otherwise. For one thing, despite the fact that he possesses the power of a werewolf, he despises the curse on his clan and wants desperately to be rid of the curse, possibly due to a desire to protect his sister Ada. Through his training, he was able to control his power, earning him the nickname Blue Crescent Moon. Another thing I like about Cornell is his bond with Ada, shown through his determination to rescue her when she was captured by Dracula's minions. Funny story, actually. Turns out they're not related by blood. Ada is actually the sole survivor of an attack on a human village by Cornell's very clan in an uncontrollable rampage. Cornell was overcome by guilt over the actions of his kin and took the girl in as a sister, even giving her a pendant to protect her from the Beastmen. You know, for being a werewolf and all, Cornell is surprisingly human. Too bad his game couldn't hold my interest. In Castlevania, as in life, there is but one inevitability. No matter where you run, no matter where you hide, death will find you. Okay, how the series' personification of the end of existence bows to a vampire is beyond me, but damn if this Reaper doesn't give me the shivers regardless. Being depicted in the classical form of the Grim Reaper, death is a constant presence throughout the series, and by constant, I mean he's friggin' everywhere. Pretty much every single game in the main series features Old Skullrobe as a boss, typically near the end of the game, and sometimes assuming multiple forms. But he's never, ever without his trusty scythe, and his loyalty towards Dracula never wavers. At all. Even in the times after Dracula has been defeated, Death is constantly planning for the time when his master will inevitably return. In fact, on several occasions, he's one of the driving forces behind the events of the plot, even being the final boss of Lament of Innocence. As a character, Death is a menacing presence. On the one hand, he's a master manipulator, and has been seen in situations like in Portrait of Ruin, where he waited for Jonathan and Charlotte to deal with Ronner so he could help Dracula regain his power, and in Curse of Darkness, where he deceitfully influenced Hector's revenge against Isaac under the identity of Zed. On the other hand, he's an imposing presence. Be honest, if you were staring him in the face, you'd be desperate for a change of pants. Hey, Jonathan, you wanna know a secret? Come closer. No, closer. You wouldn't have gotten far without Charlotte, you big hothead! As one of the two playable characters in Portrait of Ruin, Charlotte Olin is the brains of the duo, and she's damn proud of it. A gifted mage in spite of her youth, she's an essential part of the game. She's also a total bookworm, always having her nose in one of her spellbooks. Kinda reminds you of a certain other nerd that I have a fondness for, doesn't it? Anyway, if there's one thing that Charlotte hates, it's being treated as a child. Because in spite of her age, she's actually the more rational of the duo. Let's face it, if Jonathan was on his own, he would have been dead before too long. The guy's too hot-headed for his own good. Thankfully, Charlotte's always there to keep his head on straight, even if it means beating some sense into him. She's a little too confident in her studies, however, and it leads to some interesting reactions when she comes across something she hasn't read about. And she's just so freaking cute. Yeah, I'm just gonna flat out say it, Charlotte is just plain adorable. It's one of my favorite things about her, to be honest. Not to mention her spells are essential to the game. So, when you think about it, is it any wonder why Jonathan was able to defeat both Bronner and Dracula? He had first-class waifu material with him along the way. Do your thing, fanfic writers! Order of Ecclesia was an interesting case during the time when Castlevania's characters were becoming more developed. Shanoa, though admittedly hot, was actually rather cliché and kind of boring. This is justified in that her memories and emotions were literally stolen from her in the beginning of the game, but it's still rather uninspired. On the other hand, we have Albus. Albus is the main antagonist for a majority of the game ever since stealing that MacGuffin superglyph, the theft of which was said to be responsible for Shanoa's amnesia. Throughout the game, he pops in, giving Shanoa 2 of the pieces of Dominus and revealing that there's more going on than you initially think. It's after he absorbed the last piece and succumbed to its power, forcing me to fight and defeat him, that I realized, after rescuing the villagers that is, that my view of Albus began to change. As it turns out, he knew all about Dominus, including the cost of using its power, and stole the glyph in hopes of protecting Shanoa from its user's cruel fate. He even went so far as to sacrifice his own soul to save Shanoa after she defeated Dracula. Everything he did, all his efforts, all his sacrifices, were not for his own sake, but for the sake of his beloved adopted sister. A brother, people! This is a brother! This is honestly why I prefer Albus over Shanoa. Shanoa simply followed her mission. Albus made it his mission to save her. Also, he has a magic gun. Hello? Tumblr social justice wankers? Here's a trigger warning for ya! From the very origins of the series, one character has been the driving force behind everything. Even when he's not explicitly in the game, his presence continues to linger. Woe be to those who flee him, for no matter where you run, you can't escape Dracula. When I say Dracu, you say La! Dracu! Dracu! Move aside, Bean Boy. Let a real Dark Lord get to work. Roll out the crimson carpet for the one and only King of Vampires! It's Dracula, bitches! I gotta give the old Konami credit. They managed to take a classic horror novel and use it as inspiration for one of the most interesting, most sinister, and most downright intimidating villains in video game history. In the early games, he was intimidating because fighting him was as hard as balls most of the time, usually having more than one form to him. Once we got to games like Symphony of the Night, they gave him a personality. One that was admittedly narmy at first, but at the same time, made him a truly three-dimensional villain. He's actually had some rather defining character moments, such as back when he was Matthias Cronquist in Lament of Innocence, before he became the Bloodsucker himself. His personality combines elements of tragedy, menace, and badassery all in one. Tragedy, since his fall into darkness was brought about by the death of his love. Menace, since you can feel his hatred for humanity the moment you enter his presence. Badassery, because he can spill your blood in seconds if you're unprepared. And when you consider the kind of monsters that humans can be, it's no wonder he kept coming back. He's the embodiment of mankind's own evil. He may not belong in this world, but he sure as hell belongs in the books as one of the best villains in video games. Fawful, Gowl, Ganondorf, any other would-be Dark Lords? Take notes.
There can be only one Lord of Darkness.
Yeah, what he said. Step down, Chuck Norris! Hey kids, you know those monsters under your bed? Yeah, they're hiding from Julius Belmont. This is a guy so manly that even at the age of 56, he's still kicking ass and raring for more. Julius, hands down, is the most powerful Belmont in the entire bloodline. In fact, this was the man who defeated Dracula for good back in 1999. Too bad he went over 30 years without remembering any of it. Yeah, when he first appears in Aria of Sorrow, he has the whole amnesia thing going, but that never really bothered me. And when he regained his memory, we learned that there was genuine badassery behind that rugged exterior. But Julius is more than just tough looks. He has the same strong sense of duty as any other Belmont. This shows when you fight him in Aria of Sorrow because he's determined to put down Dracula even though it hurts him knowing that Soma's the reincarnation of Dracula. And despite his age, he manages to put up one of the best fights in the entire game. But it's at the end of the fight that we see that despite his sense of duty, he still recognizes the good in Soma, which is why he held back. He understands full well that Soma is fighting against his destiny and is willing to give him the chance to do so. He even promises to honor Soma's request to kill him if he falls into darkness, something that Julius is fully capable of doing. He continues to show genuine concern about Soma in Dawn of Sorrow, as evidenced by the warnings he gives throughout the game. But one thing still bugs me. Not about Julius, but about Konami. How come we never got a game about the Battle of 99? Oh right, because Konami is Konami. With Castlevania Judgment, most people didn't know what to expect. It was a 3D fighter in a series of action games, a famous manga artist was handling the character design, and the roster was a who's who of the franchise. With one exception. Everyone, meet your real protagonist. Make some room in the TARDIS, boys, because Castlevania's resident Time Lord is here to make some history. With all the crap people talk about Judgment, Aeon is arguably the best thing to come out of this game. Even with the little amount of screen time he's gotten, I've actually come to love this character like you wouldn't believe. For one thing, being the chess master behind the entire game, he has a gentlemanly air about him. He's a polite yet direct individual, never revealing everything but revealing just enough. Granted, being a guardian of time and space, he knows a lot. He's been wandering the ages for eternity to satisfy his curiosity, and as such is always willing to offer insight anytime it is needed. Another reason I like Aeon so much is because he's a rare example of a puppet master who's actually the good guy. When Galamoth sent the Time Reaper to destroy Dracula's era, Aeon was the man who gathered the other members of the game's roster and set them on their respective paths in order to find someone capable of setting things right. He is a manipulator to be sure, but he does so in a way that has class. I could go depth about how he plays in Judgment, but that's a story for another time. Damn it! When I first played Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, I didn't initially think much of Alucard. Of course, back then I didn't realize his name was just Dracula spelled backwards. Little did I realize at the time that he would become as famous as the entire Belmont clan itself. But when you consider what Symphony of the Night did for this guy's character arc, I'm not surprised in the slightest. Alucard, also known as Adrian Fahrenheit Sepesh, is the son of Dracula who originally appeared in Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. He was one of Trevor's allies after said vampire hunter earned his trust by beating the crap out of him, but that didn't do much to establish his character. Flash forward to Symphony of the Night, and damn! Like I said in an earlier list, Alucard has the determination to stand up to Dracula without the whip, and the strength to defeat him without that whip. As it turns out, both Alucard and Dracula were influenced by the same event, the murder of Lisa, Dracula's second lover and Alucard's mother. But where Dracula turned down the path of hate, Alucard was guided by his mother's last words. He stood against Dracula, not out of hatred for his father, but his desire to protect his mother's last wish. So much so that even after Dracula's final defeat, Alucard continued to watch over Soma in both Aria and Dawn of Sorrow under the guise of Genya Arikado, in hopes that the tragedies of the past would not be repeated. I don't know about you, but to hold to your resolve century after century takes some serious dedication. And from a vampire no less. All things considered, it's pretty hard to hate Alucard. He's a great character to play as, he's well developed, and he proves that one's path is not bound by his bloodline. He has earned his place in legend. Big time.
But you must always remember that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Okay, number one's on the way, but first some honorable mentions. Eric Lacard from Bloodlines and Portrait of Ruin for his contributions to the story of the Morris clan. Hector from Curse of Darkness for his development from Revenge to Resolve. And Bronner from Portrait of Ruin, who did a good job as an antagonist until Dracula and Death hijacked the plot. Those of you who have followed me closely over the past few years already know this, so I'm not going to beat around the bush. Number one is Soma Cruz. is a character I've talked about before. Hell, I talked about him in my top 30 favorite video game characters, and while I could take the easy way out and direct you to that video, I've made that mistake before. I don't want to look lazy again, especially with the #1 spot. So, let's get down to business. Soma's story is one of inner conflict and a story of standing against destiny. When he first appears as the hero of Aria of Sorrow, he seems like an ordinary high schooler, and he seems to like it that way. Of course, once his power of dominance begins to manifest, things change. At first, he doesn't care about his power. He just wants to get himself and his childhood friend Mina out of the castle. As he interacts with the other characters in the game and eventually learns that he's Dracula's reincarnation, he becomes determined to defy his destiny, which he succeeds in doing. Not only that, but thanks to the bonds he forged with his friends, he manages to resist the invitation to darkness again in Dawn of Sorrow. So just what about Soma makes him my favorite Castlevania character? Well, let's take a look about how he compares to the actual Dracula. Pretty much everything that made Dracula into the villain that he was could have happened to Soma, and nearly did. Yet, while Dracula only saw the dark side of humanity, Soma was also able to see the light. It's thanks to this light that Soma was able to stand up to his dark destiny. Twice. When you think about it, there's a lesson to be learned from Soma's story. Our fates are not set in stone. It's up to our actions to determine what will be, and Soma proves this with true determination. That's what makes Soma #1 on my list. I'm the Quarter Guy, and be sure to tune in next week for my next list. Same bat time, same bat channel. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like. If you have something to say, leave your comments below. I really appreciate them. If you want to see more, click the annotations for my playlists, and click that little subscribe button down there. I'm also on social media, and if you have some extra money and want to support the channel, you can donate to my Patreon. Trust me, I'll make it worth your while. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.